I believe that environmental scanning is one of the most important tools that you can use as a leader. So, my question for you today is, what are you paying attention to? Well, hello, everyone. My name is Glen Guyton, keynote speaker, futurist, and today I want to share with you three trends that I am watching right now. Now, you may say, Glenn, why are you watching stuff? Because I'm interested in what's going on in the world around me, and I find that as a leader, many times we just pay attention to our work. We're not paying attention to what's going on in the world around us, and I think that's problematic because we get this siloed thinking, and we also get this woe is me thinking, like it's our industry is such a big problem, these people around here are such a big problem, and we isolate our problems. Don't isolate your problems. Your problems are probably actually bigger than what you're doing in your immediate environment. Now, you could be messing things up. That's true. That's honest. You could really be royally screwing up things, and everything could be your fault. But I doubt it. We have to look at the picture. So that's why I try to follow trends. And in addition to following trends, I really try to do a good environmental scan and pay attention to the weak signals that are going on around me. So, what is a scan? If you're new to maybe some of this strategic foresight work, what is a scan? Well, scanning is just simply gathering signals from the environment. These could be weak hints, early trends, looking at data points, listening to stories that might matter later, right? So you're gathering information that isn't necessarily pertinent right now, but it can help you make decisions for the future. So it's less about predicting the future and more about noticing patterns before they're obvious. Now, a trend is obvious. So I do follow some trends. It's important to look at what's going on in the here and now. So a trend really is something that's already visible and it's moving forward. Like you can see it. It is definitely happening. Things are going in a certain way. Trends can move up, trends can move down, trends can stay stagnant, right? Things are, hey, that's a trend. This line is just straight, not a lot of variation. That is a trend, and we need to pay attention to those things. So what trends am I keen on right now? So three trends that I am following. One is our aging population. We are getting older. No doubt about that. Our country is getting older. We're living longer. We're having fewer babies. Uh, we're getting married later in life. The population is aging. That is a fact. Another trend that I'm following is the increasing level of cancer in young people. Now this is different for different types of cancers, but yes, cancer uh, is impacting younger people. Uh, we tend to think of cancer as an older person's disease, something later in life. We think that young people are healthy and virulent, and for the most cases, that's true. But there is a trend where certain cancers are becoming more prevalent in a younger population. That's a trend. And then the other trend is the erosion of trust in institutions. That's something that's really happening. So we are losing trust. As a matter of fact, that's why I wrote this book, The Art of Harmonious Trust, which is available on Amazon. But I wrote that book because there's a trend that our trust in institutions is changing. This is across the board in corporations and political institutions and some social institutions. The level of trust or respect that we've had for these institutions has changed. So we have to pay attention to those trends. And so as I think about a trend, it's kind of like, like a river. Again, we kind of see the flow, the patterns, the boundaries of rivers are clearly defined. we see these things happening and they're moving in a certain direction, and so we have to pay attention to it. But the thing is about a river is, like, again, it's already there, right? So we already have boats and equipment and machinery, things to support us along that path, right? So we make adjustments, but that path is already well worn. Now, this is where signals come in. So the signals that I try to pay attention to are earlier uh, instances of things happening. It may be like, kind of like the bank starts to turn just a little bit, or you get a little trickle of water that eventually is going to carve its way out from the main path and create like a new tributary or something like that. All right, I'm not an environmentalist. I don't know much about rivers, but I know that sometimes things happen and the flow of the river changes, but it normally happens kind of slowly, a little trickle here, a little trickle there, and things change. And so those are the weak signals that I think that we need to pay attention to as leaders. So think of like the slow erosion of the riverbank, or the subtle trickle of water across a dam that might lead to a major shift earlier or later on. It'll be like a little crack, right? And then that crack can just get a little bigger and bigger and bigger, and pretty soon it's a major flood, right? But it starts as a little tiny crack. So what are those little tiny cracks that we need to pay attention to as we think about major trends? So let's go back to the trends that I talked about earlier and kind of connect decision making based on following trends and then also looking for signals. So the aging population, we have a big increase of how many people are over the age of 65. From 2010 to 2022, it increased from roughly 13% to 17%. That's a 4% jump of older people, right? So people living longer, they're older, less young people in the system. That's a trend. So what are some weak signals that we may want to pay attention to related to that? Well, we might want to explore or listen for signals related to the impact on healthcare. How is this aging population impacting healthcare? How is it impacting insurance rates? Um, how is it impacting how we build homes? What's the buzz around this? As you get older, your knees get a little bad, they get a little creaky. Hey, maybe it's going to lead to fewer two-story homes, more one-story homes. I have a one-story home, right? Because I don't want to be going up and down the stairs, and I'm not even 65 yet. All right, so technology. Um, some technology that I need. After 40, I needed this technology right here. So you don't see my office, but I have three monitors, and I have like a big text. I need technology that I can see. It has to be bright. It needs to be functional for me as I get older. When I was 25, I didn't need these. I didn't need the big letters on the screen. I didn't have to have my phone brightness up all the way. My technology has had to change because I'm older. So those are things that you can start paying attention to that may not be trends yet, but may start to be little trickles that we have to pay attention to see the impact of this aging population trend. Think about the increased cancer rate. How can that impact us, or what signals do we need to start looking for? Um, what are the environmental factors? How will it impact wellness programs at work? Uh, are we going to have to change the way we eat? Uh, will there be changes in screening and treatment protocols? Will the narratives change around the healthy years, right? Supposedly young people are healthy. Like when you were young, when I was 25, I felt like I was invulnerable, right? That I was, I couldn't be harmed. That you know, I was going to live forever. Now 25 plus years later, I'm thinking like, hey, I got to be wise about the time that I have. And so this increased cancer rate in young people will start to probably impact other areas of our lives, our industries, and how we think about things. So how do we pick up on what those shifts will look like? We already know what the trend is, but what are the other things that it will impact, and what signals should we be thinking about or looking at? And then the erosion of trust, as we think about that people trust government less. They trust institutions less. And so maybe there is a rise in different types of leadership structures. There are cultural shifts related to authority that we can pay attention to. These are the weak signals, the whispers that we can start to try to pay attention to. Maybe there will be different type of micro communities versus the large macro communities that we put so much trust in. We can even maybe listen for whispers of a shadow government. Some of those whispers are out there, right? But if we combine the whisper with the trend, we may be able to uncover some things. So now, how do you apply this? Like, you can't pay attention to everything. You cannot. I promise you that you cannot pay attention to everything. So that's why I gave you 3 trends that I'm watching. You may find other trends that are more applicable in your environment and set up some type of a scanning tool, scanning radar. We won't talk about that today, but you can do that to just keep your 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 finger on the pulse of what's happening in your industry. But let me talk to my HR managers and people that are interested in workforce retention. These trends that I mentioned, combined with the signals, may be helpful to you as you think about your workforce strategy of the future, because you have to build for tomorrow, not build for today. So let's think about the trends that I mentioned. As the population ages, we know that there's going to be a number of people that need to retire. Uh, the physical design of buildings may have to change. Again, the technological tools that you have for a younger workforce are going to be much different than that of an older workforce, and so these things begin to hint of how we need to plan for the future, how we need to staff for the future. Um, the disruption that can possibly happen in our work places as a population gets older, right? You may have more sick time. You may have increased healthcare costs. You may have more multi-generational families, which leads to workplace disruption. So these are things that you have to consider because you're paying attention to the trends and you're paying attention to the weak signals that go correlate with some of those trends. Again, going to thinking about the rising cancer rates in young people. Now we're beginning to challenge some previous assumptions about the availability of young people, the health of young people, the impact of young bodies related to healthcare costs and plans that you provide as an employer. Um, so, how do you plan for these things before it becomes a major problem? Maybe you need to change how you fund your benefits. Maybe you need to do more education in the workplace for everyone, not just the older workers, but the younger workers as well. Maybe you need more people. Uh, Maybe you need to change some of your like how flexible you are as far as time off and healthcare interventions, other things that are related to health that may have not been an issue because you were dealing with a younger population that was relatively healthy. Now you're dealing with a population that, for whatever reason, there are some health challenges that come along with these younger workers and with the older workers too. Everybody is dealing with challenges, and so your benefit package may need to change. How you fund those benefits may need to change. But this is how we start changing these things, tying these things together. And again, as a futurist, we don't predict the future, but we just look at these patterns and we try to plan around those cracks, right? You start planning around those cracks, those weak signals, and if those signals start to get stronger, you are already moving in that direction because you've noticed the trends and you listen to those quiet whispers that are out there. Then the erosion of trust in institutions, that really just means the employees no longer default to believing what employers say or any other formal body says. So, how you communicate with workers is going to change. I think that this trend of lack of trust has already change how we operate, that we have to be more transparent. People are less likely to believe the spin, right? We have access to so much information that I think that continues to erode trust. So we have to bring people in. That's a trend that has already happened. But then what's the next iteration of that, right? What's the next iteration of that? That's what we need to put our ear to the ground and see how this is going to shape, not millennials, but like Gen Z and Gen Alpha. I mean, probably more Gen Alpha. How is Gen Alpha going to look at institutions, and how you communicate between the boss, the higher ups, and the people at lower levels in the institution? We have to change how we approach people, and some of the paradigms that baby boomers and Gen X operated under will no longer fly. So these are things that we have to think about. So all of these things can impact you as an HR professional, your employee retention strategies, and so we want to make sure that we build adaptive systems. And how do we do that? By paying attention to both trends, but also looking at the weak signals that are right in front of us. It's really just about, putting on a different set of glasses so that we can read the fine print. I would encourage you to do that. I think that when we tune into weak signals early, organizations can design environments that adapt before pressure turns into crisis. So I would encourage you to set up some type of environmental scanning process in your organization. Maybe you meet once a month, once a week, to talk about the future and start to plan your future workforce strategies around the things that you are observing. We don't want to be caught in a crisis. We don't want to be caught after the fact. We want to plan for the future. Well, thank you so much. My name is Glen Guyton. I'm excited about scanning. I'm excited about the future. But you know what? I want you to have a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful day.